Here in Milano, where my daughters are attending an American school which observes American holidays, they will have the day off on October 8th as their school celebrates Columbus Day. Christopher Columbus was an Italian explorer and navigator who sailed for Spain, and who, we were told in elementary school, discovered America. And by America, we mean he discovered the Bahamas, South America, Central America, and Cuba. The only parts of the United States we can truthfully say Columbus discovered are the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And when we say discovered, we do need to mention that Columbus was absolutely convinced he had made it to the Indies, calling the inhabitants Indians, a mistake that requires continuous clarification to this day. And in fact, there's no consensus among historians that Columbus ever realized he had made it to a continent previously unknown to Europeans. And when we say discovered, we must exclude the voyages of Leif Erikson, the Norse explorer who set foot on the Americas about 500 years before Columbus landed on San Salvador. And when we say discovered, we definitely must exclude the inhabitants of the islands whose ancestors had lived in the Americas for well over 13,000 years. Now, these natives, the Arawaks, were curious about Columbus and his men. They were very open and very generous. For his part, Columbus, in his captain's log, wrote, "They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever one wished." And so Columbus subjugated them. His men took women and children as slaves for sex and labor. He forced the men into the mines to dig for gold, and if they did not reach their quotas, Columbus's men would chop off their hands. When the terrified Arawaks tried to escape into the hills, the Spaniards sent their dogs after them to hunt them down and kill them. Historian Howard Zinn writes, "Trying to put together an army of resistance, the Arawaks faced Spaniards who had armor, muskets, swords, and horses. When the Spaniards took prisoners, they hanged them or burned them to death. Among the Arawaks, mass suicides began. Infants were killed to save them from the Spaniards. In 2 years, through murder, mutilation, or suicide, half of the 250,000 Indians in Haiti were dead. By the year 1515, there were perhaps 50,000 Indians left. By 1550, there were 500. A report of the year 1650 shows none of the original Arawaks or their descendants left on the island." As a kid, the explorations had been my favorite part of American history. I loved the maps of the voyages, and I loved the maps that showed the Americas as barely recognizable land masses that grew more realistic as more explorations were made and more information was gathered. So while Columbus's first voyage across the Atlantic may have been the 1492 equivalent of Apollo 11, I now think the whole thing makes for a wildly inappropriate national holiday for the United States. And by inappropriate, I mean for the Enlightenment-inspired all men are created equal United States. The United States that was founded on freedom of speech, freedom of the press, religious tolerance, and equality. The United States that fought against the Nazis in World War II. The United States that welcomed immigrants with open arms, especially those fleeing existential, life-threatening situations. The United States that was founded on the belief that the primary purpose of government is to protect the rights of its people, and that all people are entitled to certain rights by virtue of simply being human. And that America, celebrating Columbus Day, is totally inappropriate. As opposed to the other America, the one that decimated the Native American population, put citizens of Japanese ancestry into concentration camps, that not only stands by but stands in the way as women are shamed after coming forward after being raped or sexually harassed, the America that sits by today while law-abiding African American citizens are murdered by police officers who are not held accountable, the America that does not welcome immigrants seeking asylum, but actively destroys families by taking their children. Now for that America, celebrating Columbus, who not only initiated the transatlantic slave trade, but also engineered the first genocide of indigenous people in the New World, for that America to celebrate the mercenary sailor Christopher Columbus is totally appropriate. 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Gold ran out, the sea ran red, as Columbus killed